Good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon, Joyce.
Well, I'm with Ian McGonnigal, and I'm in his office here in Boston, and we're tapping into his wealth of knowledge. Now, the next question has to do with how does social media amplify event marketing? And Ian's going to spend some time with me today talking about that. So, Ian, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Joyce. So, social media amplifies event marketing, and I do like to think it does amplify it, or as Joyce told me a few minutes ago, she likes to use the word augment. So it's all about building a community around your event, or taking your event and plugging it into a community. And the first way that social media amplifies event marketing is through engagement. And what it does is it allows your attendees and people who haven't attended, quite frankly, to become more engaged in the process. So they might be building their own content, they might be immersing themselves in the content. It's a way to engage people beyond the proximity of an event, so I'm talking about the physical space, as well as the timeline of the event, because an event is a singular point in time. That said, by having different tools available for people to engage in social media about the subject matter of your event, you'll be a lot better off. So this might be as simple as a Twitter hashtag that you have for your event. It might be a Facebook page you set up. It might be a LinkedIn group that you set up. It might be your own social network that you happen to have. Maybe it's a Ning site or a branded social network. Whatever the case, it's important to understand that if you're able to create the platforms for people to engage with you socially, it's going to go a long way as far as driving further engagement of what's going on in social media beyond the physical constraints of your event. The second way is interaction, and I think that beyond engaging people more deeply, interaction, people are now able to interact with your brand, with your content, with your subject matter, with anything that you have going on at your event. So if you do create these tools and you are able to build some sort of interaction, that's fantastic. Now, interaction, of course, happens online. It can happen through a mobile device, so maybe someone is tweeting what your speakers are saying at the keynote session. It can also happen on the show floor. So if you have a trade show, for example, you might have tweet decks set up in a corner of your booth. You might have kiosks where people can tweet what's going on in the show, or maybe it's a way of integrating YouTube or Flickr and places that you can share other content, whether it's links, whether it's photo, whether it's video, to really help drive that interaction between your community, your brand, and with each other. The third area is immersion, and I think that social media really does a good job of driving immersion for people. So instead of it being a one-way conversation where people are listening to what you have going on and observing what you have going on at the event, immersion allows people to actively participate. So not only are you really using all five senses at the event from an experiential perspective, but you can then immerse people beyond the physical constraints of the event yet again by having them participate online and through their mobile devices and social media.
Give us an example of immersion.
I think a good example of immersion is if I am, let me think about that for a second. A good example of immersion is if I am in a speaking session and the speaker is saying something very relevant, and perhaps they have twit poll up there, or tweet poll, I always change the words around. And you can then become part of how the speaker presents their presentation, because they'll do a poll, you'll use your mobile device, and you'll answer the question that's been polled, and all of a sudden the speaker has a great understanding of what that audience makeup is, or how you answered that question, and they can then tailor their presentation based on the interaction that you have had at the event through tweet poll.
Got it. Thank you.
The fourth way that social media enhances events or amplifies events is through internalization. And I've always been a big fan of teaching, because as we all know, the more you teach, the more you learn. If you're able to translate and understand content and teach it to another person, you will internalize that information. An example of that would be, again, if you're at a speaking session and you're listening intently to the panel discussion, if you are retweeting some of the key quotes or some of the key ideas that that speaking panel is participating in, then you'll be able to internalize that as well as share it across your community.
I'm going to stop for a second, because you and I sat next to each other at TS2 in Chicago, and I was just floored. And you were a master example of tweeting during the conference, that session. You were constantly taking those sound bites from the speakers, and there was a panel that Bob Dahlmeyer was hosting, and you were putting it out there for your community. And I sat there going, oh, I'm learning something. So thank you for being the physical example of what to do.
Well, My pleasure, and I think it's important because what I personally got out of that was I learned a lot about what the panelists were talking about. I was able to share it with my community, and people that weren't physically at the event were able to then see what was going on in TS2 during that panel discussion. And then they shared that information, and then different people started to look up those speakers to learn more about what they had going on. So a lot of positive feedback happens as a result of that, not for me as a tweeter, or Twitter, as a member of the Tweeple community, but for the speakers themselves and the content that they're talking about live at the event.
This gets back to, if as an exhibitor, yes, there are people that are coming and showing up for the show, but there's another whole audience that couldn't make the show for some reason. Maybe it was distance, maybe it was timing, and to have that immersion in the community and putting information out gives them a sense that they were actually there. And that excitement that you're building around your exhibit at the show can be extended beyond.
I'd like to borrow from a movie quote from Gladiator, and it goes something like, what we do in life echoes in eternity. And the way I like to think about it is, what you do online echoes in eternity. So if you're able to participate and be at a physical event, that's one thing. If you're able to share that event online, then that event now has a sense of permanence, and people for generations to come can see what that content is, whether or not they were there at the event.
Good point, good point.
And then finally, social media amplifies event marketing through extension. It extends the event, so it gives an event a long tail. It also can be used to drive awareness and thought leadership and audience generation before the event. So when you think about an event, again, being a physical point in time and a physical proximity, what social media does is it actually extends that investment in that content so that you get a higher return on your investment and you're able to share it with a wider audience for a longer period of time.
Good. And about that extension, that's one of the things, especially as being in the audience and hearing a good speaker, you learn so much from the other questions that somebody else posed, and you go, I didn't even think about that. And to extend that conversation further beyond the walls of that particular time frame, I think is real important.
It makes a lot of sense, and it also gives people an opportunity to ask questions and comment on the session even after it's taken place. So if you go to show blogs and that sort of thing, you'll find people will post questions and ideas and thoughts and extended conversations that didn't happen at the event, but add a lot of value to the community and the subject matter at large.
Good. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Joyce.